Hey everyone, welcome back to the Freedom and Flow podcast. Today we're diving into a topic that so many of us can experience at some point in our life, and that is grief. Grief is heavy, unpredictable, and deeply personal. But here's the truth, you don't have to be swallowed by it. You can grieve and still move forward, and you can honor your loss while still honoring yourself. So that's what we're talking about today. Let's get ready to dive in. Hello, and welcome back to the Freedom and Flow podcast. My name is Leandria Devis, and I am your host. And so happy that you are here. And I will be honest, life was lifing. I made a commitment to, post every other week. That was my commitment, and I didn't honor my commitment over this past month, given life and things are happening, and even what we're talking about today, grief and grieving. So I am jumping back in because I want to stay committed to my commitments. So I am here and so happy that you are here and listening in. And, I hope that you give me some grace around posting. And I'm glad that you're listening in. I really appreciate it. So today, the topic we're going through is flowing in grief. This is the Freedom and Flow podcast. And with this podcast, we talk about breaking free from the things that do not serve us, living in freedom, living in the flow, and embracing our purpose. And we're really leaning into the living in flow piece, especially when it comes to grief, because you just never know when grief is going to come around the corner and say hello. So being able to flow in that. And, I'm pretty sure if you're listening to this, we've all had to deal with grief in some way, whether it be big or small. And we all have different life experiences. And essentially today, I don't want to stay just talking about grief and the horribleness of it, but just kind of talk about it just authentically and how it's come up for me in my life recently as well. You might also see my dogs in the background. They are part of my healing process and they snuck in here, so please bear with me as well. Okay, as we dive in, so today we're going to really talk about flowing through grief, embracing the feelings, acknowledging the pain, but not staying stuck. And as you continue to listen, if you like what you're listening to, like, follow, share this podcast with someone who you believe would really benefit from it. Okay, so if you've been tuning in, you will know that I shared my own grief journey, specifically my miscarriage journey, and which has happened over 2023 and 2024 is really when it all went down. And in 2025, doing a lot of healing, moving forward, learning how to live in grief. But yes, those years were definitely a roller coaster of emotions. I had my first miscarriage in, April 2023. We tried again, had another miscarriage October, November, and then had my third miscarriage in August of 2024. So a lot of it felt, the first one was like, these things happen. Okay, and that's what I keep hearing. These things happen, very common. Okay, I can accept that. Let's try again. And then you try again, and then you're like, what is happening? Did not plan for this. This was nowhere near my plans of what would take place in trying to conceive. And then the third one is like, all right, God is playing with me right now. And so I think after the first, I was really introduced to the world of grief and the complexity of it, because you can feel two very immense, strong emotions at the same time. Especially when you see other friends, family who are growing their family, having children, you have this desire, like this, well, one, you feel desire for that to be you. Not so much envy, but just like that's something that you desire, right? You also feel joyful for this person, but you also feel sorrowful at the same time because of what you've lost, and having to like be in a space where you're trying to hold space for yourself, but holding space for other people. I would say that's kind of some of the things that I've experienced, and just waves of grief, like just days where I am not myself, days where I will do work, I will do what I need to do, but I don't really want to be around anyone. I don't want to talk to anyone. And I was talking to my therapist about this, and I asked her, can you give me a timeline of grief? Like in the next 6 months, you can expect the grief is going away, something like that. And she was like, no, Leandria, grief is something that you learn to live with. And I don't like that because I just want the feelings to go away, more so the sad feelings to go away. But, they say that grief means that you loved someone or something very deeply. And even that, just to feel like I loved something that couldn't even touch, wasn't even able to hold, because my miscarriages were very early. So yeah, I feel like this world of grief is just very interesting. And I also would say it's given me more compassion and more empathy for others, because not that I was, but I don't think, sometimes you just don't understand something until you experience it yourself. And then experiencing it, you're like, oh, now I understand. When someone says they couldn't even get out the bed, now I understand. Grief is it's different for everyone, and it can show up in different ways. And, they talk about um, grief, and it can look different ways, loss of a loved one, relationships, your identity. You can grieve something that's maybe not even alive, like your identity, right? Or something that is alive, of course. So there's just so many ways to grieve. And there are also those 5 stages that I'm sure we've heard in movies, TV shows, even your therapist. And I am no therapist, so I'm not going to give any diagnoses or talk about the science behind it, but I will walk us through it. And I'll kind of talk about how that's come up for me. And this is kind of going to be like on the spot too. So those 5 stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. One thing I keep saying is that with grieving, there is no linear path. It's no, okay, I went through denial, now I'm going through anger. Okay, now I'm going through bargaining. It's just like a hop, skip, jump, where like whatever grief is feeling that day is what you're going to be experiencing. And the denial piece, I would definitely say, is something that I went through with my first one. Even when I was experiencing certain symptoms and complications, I was just like, I'm going to be fine. This is a miracle waiting to be happening. I'm good. Even in the day of, when they told me, when I went to the doctor and they do like a ultrasound, and when they do these ultrasounds, it's like, okay, that's a whole other conversation, but she was very quiet and doing the ultrasound. And, when someone's quiet, something's happening. But in my head, I was like, maybe she just had a hard day. Maybe she's really tired. And then when the doctor came around and told me, I just was like, okay. I think I was experiencing shock for sure in that moment, because it was not the news I was expecting. I was thinking, we hear a small heartbeat, we're going to keep on, just some glimpse of hope. But to just be straight up told you were having a miscarriage, I was not expecting that. So I definitely felt denial in that moment. And I was just like, you might want to go back and check again, okay? So that there was that moment, but it didn't roll right into anger, because that's the next step. It didn't roll right into that. And so with denial, there's that shock, that disbelief. The mind protects itself by refusing to accept the loss. Like, this can't be real, right? So I feel like I definitely experienced that. Excuse me. But the anger, the next piece, which is like frustration, resentment, blame directed at oneself or others or even God. Like, why is this happening? I don't think that came around until like after my second, because in that moment, it really felt as if like something is going on, like something is wrong. And God, I believe in God, I serve God, and I feel like you can fix this, and you're choosing not to. And I believe that God controls all things, and that things do happen to us that are not happy. I believe that He doesn't always let's say he'll let it happen. Essentially, he will allow it to happen. Not that he wanted it to, but he would allow it to happen. And that even got me upset because it's like, you opened the Red Sea. Okay. You burned like a burning bush, right? Even today, like there are miracles happening and you chose not to do it for me. Like what are we doing, Lord? What are we doing? And so there was definitely some anger there. Definitely some anger. And if you know me, if you've seen me, you probably never really saw me angry before, unless you're like really related to, like, meaning like my brothers, they've seen me angry, my parents angry, they see me angry, but I don't think people have really seen me angry. So I don't think I've expressed it in a way that I was just like walking around angry, but I think internally I was definitely angry, which, not that it took me directly into bargaining, which is the next one. Bargaining talks about attempting to make sense of the loss, often with what if, and if only had done something different. Oh yeah, I've seen stories, women work through this where it's just, maybe if I didn't go for a run that day, maybe if I didn't get on the plane, maybe if I didn't lift those weights in that workout session, maybe if I ate broccoli the night before. Like there's so many what ifs around, like what could I have done to prevent this? And the doctors will tell you in most cases you couldn't have prevented it. It was just going to happen. It's the body's natural way of saying this life is not viable. We're going to do what we do to let it go. So, that's what the doctors say. But as a human, you want to have control. And so you try to figure out all the remedies, the solutions. Try this, take this pill, do this cream, do this. I mean, even I feel like something that going through recently is just, okay, when we are ready to try again, like what does that look like? Maybe I should start doing this and doing that. And I get very flustered because there's a million and one things you can do. Someone always has something different around taking this thing, doing that thing, going off on a retreat. Like there's so many different things you can do. And so I think for me, to help relieve that bargaining phase is just one, trusting God that his timing is perfect. Whew. And as I say that, I believe it. But even as I say it, it's like, your timing is perfect, but it could have been this, and that, those 2 years, So, but I do believe his timing is perfect. And I do believe like taking the right steps and doing the testing you need to do and going through the things and like whatever your situation may look like. For me, I'm talking about my experience, but whatever your situation might look like, whether it might have been saving a loved one or preventing their death or whatever it might be, there are so many different thoughts that will come across our head, right? Or come across our mind. And working through that, but really coming down to the thought and belief that you did all that you could at the end of the day. And so with the next phase, we talked about denial, we talked about anger, bargaining, depression, this deep sadness, withdrawal, a sense of hopelessness as the reality of loss fully sinks in. Ooh, yeah. I would say there have been moments I felt depressed. I wouldn't say that I suffer from depression. I'm not going to say that. But moments where I felt it, like this deep sadness, like this, having a child is something that won't be something that I will not experience, like that hopelessness. And it comes whenever it wants to come. You could be having a great day. The sun is shining, the birds are chirping, you had some great food, and then you see a commercial that reminds you of everything, and then you like sink into this depression. And then you got to get yourself out of it. You got to like really work to get out of it. But yeah, that just those triggers around you. And I do believe in creating spaces where you are not triggered. And that doesn't mean stay in your house all day. But if you go to this party and this party is going to trigger you to go into depression, I think, there are times when you can say no. And there are times when I have said, no, I just can't do it at this time. I do believe in the scripture that says, rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. And I can definitely weep with those who weep. I got that one down. But when you're in a weeping mood and you're trying to rejoice with others, it can be really hard. So I think just finding balance and what that looks like. Some days it is, I'm going to just swallow this pill and I'm going to rejoice with my family members. I'm going to rejoice with my friends, even though I'm going through what I'm going through. And then there's some days when you can just stay back. I also believe in sharing how you're feeling. I think that's something I'm still working through, is because you don't want to sour the mood and you don't want to be the Debbie Downer, but maybe having advocates or friends, one or two people in the space you're going to be in who know your story and who see you. So you don't feel like you're so alone in that moment, or you feel like no one understands what you're going through and you're hiding it and just pushing it down, because that can make things worse, where you feel alone and isolated. And those are not the best feelings to stay in. And then the last step here is acceptance. And again, these stages you can just flow through. You can be in acceptance and then go back to depression, but you then jump to denial. So there's so many waves that can come up. And with acceptance, it's learning to live with the loss, finding ways to honor what was lost while moving forward, finding meaning again. And for me, this podcast was acceptance, was really being able to take the time to, one, verbally talk how I'm feeling, but also do it in a way that can be supportive of other women who are also in these shoes, also in the same shoes. And knowing that, yes, this is my loss. This is one thing that I actually talked about today in a session, that did happen to me, but it doesn't define my story moving forward. It doesn't put a label on me that says the worst things ever, like you can't have children. Like, it doesn't put that label on me. Yes, that did happen, and there is still hope for the future. So whatever you're going through, yes, that did happen, and there is hope for the future. There is hope to smile again, laugh again, to just feel healed and not so burdened by the things you may be feeling. So those are the 5 steps. Again, I'm no therapist. I am just sharing my experiences and how I've worked through them. A lot of it's been through therapy. A lot of it's been through talking with friends, talking with family. Also just creating avenues to get out of the spiral, because sometimes you can just start spiraling, going downward, which takes you to that depressive mode, which is, it's not the best. So even with the emotions, you feel like emotions could be sadness, anger, guilt, numbness. The numbness piece, I was saying that to somebody the other day. I was like, I don't know what to feel. I don't know if I should feel hopeful. I don't know if I should feel sad. I don't know if I should feel just happy. Like, I don't know what to feel sometimes. So grief is complicated. It can bring all those emotions. It can bring all those emotions and more. So being able to kind of work through them, again, acknowledging it and working through them. So one thing I do want to talk about just for a little bit before we wrap up is embracing the feelings. So we walk through the stages of grief, and in those stages, you'll feel happiness, sadness, numbness, guilt, those things. And so I'm learning, I'm no expert in this, but I'm learning to embrace the feelings, giving myself permission to feel those things. And those feelings are not the happiest feelings. They are not. And that's why I don't like them. I'm a pretty positive person. I can keep things upbeat. So when I find myself just going downhill or feeling these emotions, I don't like them. And so I try to find a way to get out of them. But I was talking about this with my therapist as well. And as we were walking through the session, she just told me, she was like, Landra, I don't think you really take time to feel your emotions. And I told her, you're correct. I do not. If it's a negative emotion, I prefer not to feel it. I prefer to push it down. And she was telling me the importance of feeling it. But there is a balance of feeling it, but not staying in it. But because if you feel them, it allows you to heal, is what I'm learning. It allows you to heal. And, we live in a world that tells us, be strong, move on, stop crying. But it is important to cry. It is important to take a moment to just feel it. Real strength comes from allowing yourself to feel and not pretending you're okay when you're not. That's one thing. Let me say that again. Real strength is in allowing yourself to feel and not pretending you're okay when you're not. Okay, you have permission to feel it all. And so when talking with my therapist, I was telling her, yeah, I don't like these emotions. And she was telling me it's important to feel them. Even a cry. A cry is a great way to just release what you're feeling. But once you feel them, you have to have proactive ways to get yourself out of them. So, meaning if I'm having a day where feeling depressed, feeling like hopelessness, feeling as if my desires, my prayers won't get answered, and looking at other people and like, Lord, look at that, look at that, look at that, and just all those things, right? And I find myself spiraling. In that moment, I need to say, man, what am I feeling? I'm feeling sadness. Yeah, I'm feeling sad. Do I need to cry? Do I need to bang something? Feel it. And then after that, taking steps to proactively go upwards. So instead of spiraling downwards, you want to spiral upwards. And for me, that could be sitting with my dog Maui. Okay, he's such a breath of fresh air. Just going outside, watching a good show. I don't sit and watch TV all day. So watching a good show that might make me laugh. Abbott Elementary is one of those shows. It's pretty funny. Or something that I like also like mystery, thriller, nothing horror, no. But like, ooh, what's going to happen? Love those shows. So taking moments to fill my cup. And sometimes it may not be, I may not have enough time to watch a whole show, but I can turn on a song that can really turn my mood upwards versus downwards. Journaling, movement, prayer, like these are all ways to just turn the narrative of what you're feeling. What you're feeling is real. What you're feeling is probably true. But we don't want to stay in that space because it's just going to take us down. So as we wrap up, I want to give us just 2, maybe 3, we'll see, but at least 2 different proactive ways to navigate through grief. And one is learning the difference between honoring grief and living in it. I think we just talked about this. We can live in grief, and we have a reason to, given what's happened, right? But there's a difference in living in it versus honoring it. And I think with honoring it, it's being able to take a step back and look back and say, I went through that. That was hard. I still feel it today. And then taking steps forward in a way that is beneficial, helpful, supportive, advancing you forward. And one thing I learned was not ruminating on what has happened in the past, because the past is the past, but choosing to live differently for the present. And so for me, it's like, yes, that has happened. Those 3 did happen, but that doesn't have to be my story for the next one. And that is a choice I have to make every time, because I don't know, but I don't know the future. I wish I did. But it's a choice that I'm making, that did happen, but it does not have to define what happens next. And living in hope and inspiration and being able to look at other women and say, if God did that for you, I'm sure he can do it for me. You can even create like a memorial or a ritual. And when I say ritual, not like a seance or anything, but like a ritual to honor your loss. That might be having a memorial, how would you call it? Like just like a picture that reminds you of what was. Something that you can just pass by and say, like, I remember, like you're giving space to remember it, but you're not living in it. Okay. And then lastly, I just want to leave you with this phrase. I honor my grief, but I am not defined by it. I allow myself to feel, heal, and flow forward. I will say it again. I honor my grief. I honor my grief, but I am not defined by it. I allow myself to feel, heal, and flow forward. So if this resonated with you and just talking about grief and how it's impacted you and your own story and how you've navigated through those 5 stages, like, subscribe, continue listening in. Not every episode will be about grief, but these episodes are about life, right? Everything from friendships, career, relationships, grieving, because all those things are part of who we are as people. And so I hope you benefited from this conversation through this episode, please like, subscribe, share, continue to listen in. We will continue to have more great episodes, more great guest speakers who will be here, and ultimately live in freedom and flow in your purpose. And take care. Bye.